Hi friends, welcome back to the Enchanted Stay, where fantasy books and stray kids live in perfect chaotic harmony, just like they should. If you watched my previous video, you know we've already covered some of the big foundational plot archetypes. Things like the quest, the heist, the chosen one, overcoming the monster, and tragedy. So today we're continuing that conversation with 5 more classic plot archetypes that show up everywhere in fantasy. Sometimes obviously, sometimes disguised, but always doing a lot of narrative heavy lifting. These are Rags to Riches, Voyage and Return, Rebirth, The Training Story, and The Underdog. If you're a reader, these help explain why certain stories hit so hard. If you're a writer, these help you build stories that work. So grab a sword, your light stick, get cozy, and let's talk archetypes. Rags to Riches is exactly what it sounds like. A character starts with nothing and ends up with everything, or at least something meaningful. In fantasy, this archetype often overlaps with hidden lineage, lost magic, or destiny, but the emotional core is always the same: watching someone powerless gain agency. This plot is incredibly satisfying because it's about transformation through opportunity. Fantasy examples include Alina Starko in Shadow and Bone. She starts as a nobody, barely surviving, and ends up one of the most powerful people in her world. Kelena Sardothian in Throne of Glass, from imprisoned assassin to political power player. And Feyre in Akatar goes from a starving huntress to a Fey high lady. What makes Rags to Riches work is that the character earns their growth through mistakes, resilience, and learning who they are when power finally arrives. Voyage and Return is one of the oldest plot archetypes in storytelling. The structure is simple. A character leaves the familiar world,
I'm going on an adventure,
enters a strange or magical one, and eventually returns changed. This isn't about conquest, it's about perspective. Fantasy thrives on this archetype because magical worlds allow characters to confront truths they'd never face at home. Classic fantasy examples: The Hobbit. Bilbo leaves the Shire, experiences danger and wonder, and returns fundamentally changed. The Chronicles of Narnia. Characters repeatedly cross into another world and back again. And Alice in Wonderland. Surreal, symbolic, and entirely about internal change. The key to Voyage and Return is that you can never truly go back the same. Even if the world looks unchanged, the character isn't. Rebirth is a plot archetype centered on transformation after a collapse. This is the story where something must die, a belief, a role, a version of the self, for something better to take its place. In fantasy, rebirth is often literal: resurrections, magical healing, curses breaking, or souls being reforged. But emotionally, it's about renewal. Fantasy examples include Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender, a complete moral and emotional rebirth. Akatar, Feyre's rebirth after death, trauma, loss, and identity fracture. The Lord of the Rings, multiple rebirth arcs, especially Gandalf and even Middle-earth itself. Rebirth stories tend to hit hardest when the audience watches the character fall apart first. Healing is only meaningful when it's earned. The training story, or the training arc, is one of fantasy's most beloved archetypes, and for good reason. This is the plot where a character must learn, fail, and grow before they're ready to face the real conflict. It's not about instant power, it's about process. Fantasy examples include The Name of the Wind. Quotha learns magic, music, and survival. Mistborn. Wind training to understand her powers and her place in the world. Eragon. Classic mentor-student progression with magical and moral lessons. Training stories are especially satisfying because they reward patience. Even failure becomes meaningful later. Every lesson pays off. This archetype is also a favorite for found family, mentorship dynamics, and slow burn confidence arcs. The underdog archetype is deeply emotional because it's built on improbability. This is the story where the odds are stacked so unfairly that success feels impossible, and that's exactly why we root for the character. Fantasy examples include The Hunger Games. Katniss is constantly underestimated. Six of Crows, a group of misfits going up against impossible odds. The Lord of the Rings, hobbits versus literal world-ending evil. The underdog doesn't win because they're the strongest, they win because they're persistent, clever, and willing to try when others won't. This archetype often overlaps with found family and rebellion stories because underdogs rarely win alone. Here's the fun part. Most fantasy stories don't use just one archetype. You'll often see rags to riches plus training story, or a underdog plus overcoming the monster, voyage and return plus rebirth. Understanding these archetypes help you recognize why certain stories feel familiar and why they still work. They're not cliches, they're emotional blueprints. So these are 5 more classic fantasy plot archetypes every reader and writer should know. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite to read. And which one do you secretly keep writing over and over again? If you want another installment, I can absolutely keep this series going. Villains, romance plots, cozy fantasy arcs, dark fantasy arcs, all of it. If you love books, magic, or Stray Kids, this is your world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay chaotic, stay magical, stay.